To the members and the senators being here, thank you so very, very much. And a special thank you to our former Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, for being here as well. Thank you very much. The Senate is in session, but the House is not. So for our foreign guests, this is very, very important to us. As you'll see, a lot of members came back simply to celebrate this day. We're glad you came back from the Senate, Peter, too. Well, it's a privilege to host all of you today for this wonderful celebration. You know, this tradition began in 1983 when two proud Irish Americans who didn't see eye to eye. One was the President, Ronald Reagan, a Republican. The other was the Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill. One was from California, and the other was from the East Coast. They agreed to break bread in honor of their motherhood and their patron saint. Almost every year since, every speaker, every president, and every prime minister has set aside the issues of the day to gather to toast the great St. Patrick. For us who are members, we talk about the relationship that Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill had. It was special. No one would ever challenge the conservatism of Ronald Reagan. We believe it's the bedrock of what people should stand with. No one would ever question the liberal views of Tip O'Neill, that he proudly stood for what he believed in. But all of us would honor the relationship those two had. And we talk about the moments and times when they rose to the occasion. It was easy to have political fights, but in some of the most difficult issues, even when it came to Social Security, they used the relationship of being Irish to find the way to put America first. And in that moment, in that time, when they had fiscal problems, they found a way to get together. They would always break bread, share some Guinness, and fight hard for their own personal beliefs. And at the end of the day, America was stronger for that. And it's unique that 40 years later, we're back here again. Now, we have Mike Kelly, Richie Neal as our co-chairs. They do a tremendous job for the Friends of Ireland Caucus. We thank you for the work that you do. We are honored to have the Taoiseach back with us again. This is not foreign land to you. You actually served here as a staffer, became a doctor, and you lead your country. We're honored and proud to have you back. And to the Taoiseach who had served here, you know the political battles at times we would have. And this is a unique time for you to be here. Because for America, we know the stakes are high. That a clash is brewing, people say, between the President and I. Of what should we do? Of what would be the ramifications for the entire nation in the coming months. And I think you might be able to settle this for us. Which one of us is more Irish? And to President Biden, from one Irish American to another, I want to strive every day to live up to the example of President Reagan and Tip O'Neill. Our positions may be reversed, but our goals can be the same, that we put this country first. I've watched an Irish heritage create bonds. Joe Kennedy became a member of Congress. He was a good member of Congress. And now he has a bigger job and a bigger task as an envoy. And he's going to make sure he fights to keep the peace. But he and I became friends simply because of our heritage. And we became close. We celebrated together when he got married. We celebrated together when he had his first child, Ellie. And I wanted Ellie to have the experience that I had as an Irish American. And so I sent Ellie a gift. I sent her a rocking elephant. And when Ellie would come to town, Joe would bring her to the office. I still have this picture where Ellie is holding with Joe and I, and Ellie's making the sound of an elephant with the trunk. And one night, laid on the floor, Lauren, his wife, FaceTimes him. We're not supposed to answer the phone, but he's a good father. He does. And I'm sitting next to him. And they're sitting in Ellie's room, and Ellie is rocking on this elephant. And I proudly look at Joe. And I said, she's going to have the same experience that I did. She's born into an Irish Democrat family, and she's going to become a Republican. Thanks for being here, Joe. But to many of you, just like me, our Irish heritage means a great deal to us. You see, my great-grandfather came from Ireland in the 1860s, Jeremiah McCarthy. He did for so many other immigrants come to America to dream of a better land, of a better opportunity. There was a new state in this union, California, so he came across. He worked just like many of the Irish on the railroad. He helped build the railroad when others didn't think it was the right job. He then became a cattle rancher. He had 2 sons who went off. And my father, he became a firefighter like a lot of other Irish. I tried to be a firefighter too. I even took the test. But there was a nepotism clause. So to this day, my mother still does not believe I'm a success yet. But maybe one day I'll be able to be that firefighter. But he left County Cork like so many other Irish. But even though he left his homeland, he never forgot the heritage. He never forgot what it meant to fight for freedom. He never forgot to win the values of friendship, the love for this country. And he always remembered that on one given day, everyone in America is Irish on St. Patrick's Day. I lost my father 23 years ago to cancer. He never had an opportunity to see me elected. He would always try to talk about politics. And if my father was alive today, I don't know if he would come for the State of the Union, but he would come for this lunch. He would want to be here. And so if I may, if I can end with my father's favorite blessing, you know it. May the road rise up to meet your feet. May the wind always be at your back. May the sun shine brightly upon your face. May the rain fall softly in your field. Until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. With that, Mr. President, it is an honor to welcome you back, and it's an honor to welcome another Irish American, and hopefully in our quest that we can lead by example of one that started this 40 years ago. I give you the President of the United States, Mr. Joe Biden.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You have all heard the expression, it's attributed to a guy named Shane Leslie, who once wrote, every St. Patrick's Day, every Irishman goes out to find another Irishman to make a speech to. Well, that's why I'm here. I'm glad to be with all of you. And most importantly, I'm glad that we're surrounded by so many friends of Ireland. Here in Washington, we've always been able to work across the aisle on Irish issues, no matter what our politics have been, no matter what else we agree or disagree on. So, Mr. Speaker, thank you for bringing us together again. I was trying to think. I think I've made almost every one of them. Don't get hurt, man. We need you. You okay? All right. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for bringing us together. And thank you to all the Irish Americans here today who've spent years building a broad bipartisan consensus on the issue of Ireland. You know, Taoiseach, it's great to see you again. We just spent a little time down in the Oval Office, and we just finished an excellent meeting. So now we can enjoy a little bit of a celebration. You know, to all the friends and leaders who travel from Ireland and Northern Ireland, it's wonderful to see so many of you here once more. I stand here today, like most of you, as a descendant of the Blewitts of County Mayo and the Finnegans of County Louth. I was telling the Taoiseach that when I would have as vice president, I'd always have a breakfast for the Taoiseach before he'd go over to see the president. for those 8 years. The 7th year, I think it was, Nance, that went in the T-shirt. I brought him into the Oval. He sat down, and before Barack could say anything, he said, "For God's sake, Barack, let the boy come home. Let him come home." I'm sure to God, true story. And he said, "You keep sending him to places like Afghanistan, Iraq, and let him come home." And you have to help me with the Gaelic expression, 100,000 welcomes. What's the? Céad Facha. And he said, he'll get 100,000 welcomes. And it was but they didn't plan on my bringing my whole family. But literally we saw thousands of people. And I was saying that being raised by a grandpop who went to Santa Clara back in the days when Irish in Northeast Pennsylvania didn't very much get a chance to go to college. And he was an All-American football player at Santa Clara. And he came back as a newspaper guy on the business side. And my grandfather used to say that, every time I walk out of his house in Scranton, Pennsylvania, when I lived there for a while, he'd look at me and say, "Joe, remember, the best drop of blood in you is Irish." And my grandmother would say, "You need more than that." But, but the fact is that when I went over to Ireland, it was a great experience. I'd been to Ireland many times, but not to actually look up to find my actual family members. And there were so many, and they actually weren't in jail. They were all, but all kidding aside, I met the Blewitts and the Finnegans and all of the folks who we were related to. Spent 6 days there, and one of the things that and the Finnegans were from County Louth. And there's still, if you go to County Louth, there's still a place called Finnegan's Pub, which is, Reverend, it's related to my family. Now, I'm the only Irishman you ever met, though, that's never had a drink, so I'm okay. I'm really not Irish. But look, as many of you know, I, like all of you, take pride in my Irish ancestry. And as long as I can remember, it's been sort of part of my soul, how I've been raised. And, during the times of darkness and despair, it always sort of brings light, strength when you think about what my ancestors went through and what we're going through now. And the history that binds us and the values that unite us. There are values I learned at my grandpop's kitchen table, where he would always, my grandpa's kitchen table, particularly on Sunday after 10:30 Mass at St. Paul's, you get to wander around the table. You never got to sit down when you were a kid, but he had 4 sons, and they'd sit there, and another guy from the newspaper, a guy named Tommy Phillips, who was sort of at the time the David Broder of the Scranton paper, and they'd sit there and they'd talk. And one day, I'm sitting there and he's talking about a guy that I didn't understand why he was sticking up for him. And he was the city chairman of the party, whose son was the city chairman when I ran for president, at any rate. And he was always in trouble. He was sort of like a late Mayor Daley, brother-in-law on the payroll kind of thing. And so I couldn't understand my grandpop with Mr. Rectitude. And I couldn't understand why he was, so liked him so much. And he reached up, and you could wander the table, he just couldn't sit. And he put his arm around me. He said, "Joey, come here." And I knew this was about to be a public lesson for Joey. And he said, "You're wondering why I like Patty?" And I said, No, Grandpa, no. He said, "No, you're wondering." I said, "Let me tell you something." He'd look at you and say, "Ambrose, I'm going to cut your heart out." And he'd mean it. Or, "Ambrose, I'm going to jump off the bridge for you." Whatever he said he'd do, just remember, do what you say. Do what you say. And he was one of those guys who always did what he said. And the biggest thing for my grandfather was, "Joey, never bend, never bow, never kneel, never yield. Never, never." And the values I learned from my mom, Catherine Eugenia Finnegan Biden, she used to say, "Remember, you're defined by your courage and you're redeemed by your loyalty. You're defined by your courage, and you're redeemed by your loyalty. My father's values were similar, but he had a saving grace. There was a Hanafi on his mother's side of the family from Galway. And, my dad was one of those guys who taught all of us that everyone, no matter who they are, everyone is entitled to be treated with dignity and respect. Everybody, not a joke. My father would no more walk through the Hotel DuPont and say hello to the chairman of the board of the DuPont company we didn't know, but say hello to him and not say hello to the shoe shine guy. That was my dad. And so, everyone was determined. These are the same values that I and all of you, I think, try to pass down to our children about hope in the future. And more than anything, I believe this hope is what beats inside the heart of all of us and all of our people. The idea that there's nothing beyond our capacity if we work at it hard enough. For generations, it was hope that brought our countries together in war and in hardship, and hope that has inspired so many of our ancestors to reach for a future of greater peace and greater security and possibilities. To this day, I think hope still brings us together. Hope. I used to drive Barack crazy because I'd always say to him, Mr. President, the country will never be more optimistic than their president. It's all about hope. It's all about hope. And to this day, hope still brings us together and it's going to allow us to achieve big things, in my view. It's important to keep that in mind, that as we approach the upcoming anniversary of the Good Friday agreements. I wish George was here, George Mitchell, who spent a long time, hard to believe, 25 years ago this year, that the agreement was made. It was delivered nearly 25 years of progress in Northern Ireland, which at the time nobody, I thought was possible. There were still people getting killed, still people getting shot, still people at war with one another. For years, people found ways to work across party lines and above the differences to make all this happen. But it was a real struggle, but people never gave up. And as I said, giants like George Mitchell devoted his life to this building and the Congress and the Senate, but he also, he never backed down. He never gave up. And the Northern Irish leaders who are here today, they took a lot of brave steps that were necessary so that their children might have a better future. And Northern Ireland leaders that are here today, let me say how important it was to see you standing shoulder to shoulder with the Chief Constable Byrne after your and affirming your commitment to the future following the attempted murder of Detective Chief Inspector Caldwell. We'll all have to continue to work to protect peace and stability, and I met out in San Diego with the British Prime Minister, and we talked about our commitment to the Windsor Framework. It's a vital, vital step, and that's going to help ensure all the people of Northern Ireland have an opportunity to realize their full potential. And I just keep reminding my family and anybody near me that I'm a big fan of Seamus Heaney, and when he passed away, his wife was kind enough to send me a long handwritten note and a copy of his poems that he had, some of which he had written by hand. And one of his Cura Troy is one of my favorite. And he used the phrase, and he said, remember that history says don't hope on this side of the grave, but then, once in a lifetime, the longed-for tidal wave of justice rises up, and hope and history rhyme. I think we have a chance of making hope and history rhyme, with all our differences. I think those of us who have been coming to this dinner a long time have never been in the case where, from the perspective of the public, the parties and the politics have been so divided as it is now. But I agree with the speaker. There's no reason why we can't find common ground. There's no reason why we can't hope to change this direction of the extremes in both our parties are pushing. I think it's important. I think it's really important. And that's the power of friendship. I think it's the power of, that's the strength of our partnership if we work at it. And simply put, I think it's the Irish of it. I think it's the Irish of it. So I hope we can turn this breakfast into a more of an everyday relationship, the way we treat everyone in this Congress. There's so many possibilities we have. We can disagree on details, but there's nothing, as I always say, just remember, we're the United States of America. Nothing is beyond our capacity. Whatever we've set our mind to in the past, we've done, no matter what. Let's remember that. That's who the hell we are. That's who we have to continue to be. And that's why I'm here. I'm so proud to introduce the Taoiseach.
Thank you all so much, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, members of Congress, ambassadors, esteemed friends and colleagues. It means so much for me to be back here again as leader of our country on our national holiday. And I'm very pleased that I'm joined in the room by political party leaders from Ireland and Northern Ireland, including Jeffrey Donaldson, Mary Lou MacDonald, Michelle O'Neill, Colm Eastwood, Naomi Long and Doug Beattie, and also the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Chris Heaton-Harris. It's great to have us all in the same room, and it's been good to be able to interact with each other over the past couple of days. And I have to say, it's a pleasure to be sat next to the Speaker and the President, not to keep the peace, but rather to thank them for doing so much to protect and promote peace and prosperity on the island of Ireland. So congratulations, Speaker McCarthy, on your election to this great office, and thank you so much for continuing the tradition of the Friends of Irish Luncheon. I know 2 years ago, in your St. Patrick's Day message, you said that on this day, everyone is Irish, a sentiment that I think will find unanimous bipartisan support. And I have to say, everyone in Ireland is proud that an Irish American holds the Speaker's gavel, and we wish you the very best in your term as Speaker, and I look forward to working with you on areas of common interest. As was mentioned earlier, it was on St. Patrick's Day in 1981 that a great American president, Ronald Reagan, first spoke of the search for a just and peaceful solution in Northern Ireland. Through successive administrations, members of Congress, the US has played a central role in helping us to find that solution. You made political interventions at pivotal moments, built relationships across parties, and supported communities. And through your contribution to the International Fund for Ireland, you encouraged dialogue and made peace building possible. The IFI's vital work continues today, thanks in no small part to the advocacy of so many of you here in the room today, and we are so grateful for that. And as a nation, we will be forever grateful to the Friends of Ireland Caucus for your commitment to Ireland North and South. Mr. Speaker, this year is the 40th anniversary of the first Friends of Ireland lunch hosted by Speaker Tip O'Neill, and I had the pleasure to meet his daughter only the other day, and also attended by Ronald Reagan. Reagan and O'Neill shared a vision of the role that the US could play in promoting and securing peace, helped achieve the impossible. And Mr. Speaker, as you know, this year is also the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. That landmark achievement was made possible because people chose to believe in the potential for peace and the promise of a better future. A bit like that American way of believing things, that anything, in fact, is possible. The efforts of the parties in Northern Ireland and the Irish and British governments would not have succeeded without your input and steadfast support from all our friends and partners here in the US. A cycle of violence that ravaged the island for 30 years or more was broken, and history was made with a remarkable peace agreement based on political leadership, vision and compromise. And now we have to complete that work and fulfil the agreement's promise, not just of peace but also of reconciliation, to build a shared island together. I know that the people of Northern Ireland want to see their political assembly and devolved government back up and running, and their politicians working to improve their lives. So much has been achieved since 1998, and today new generations of young people are growing up with no memory of the conflict their parents endured. And as somebody who grew up in the 80s and 90s, when political violence was an almost everyday occurrence, that is something to be profoundly grateful for. I believe there are now incredible opportunities for economic development in Northern Ireland, especially with the potential of the Windsor framework recently agreed between the European Commission and the EU Government. Our task now is to complete that mission and to help the people of Northern Ireland to build a more peaceful and more prosperous future together. Mr. Speaker, today we must also remember how Russia is attempting to deny the people of Ukraine any kind of future through its brutal invasion. While Ireland is a militarily neutral country, we're not politically neutral in the face of violations of international law and human rights. The past 13 months have united us all who believe in freedom and democracy, in the rule of law and the UN Charter. And we stand with Ukraine because silence means surrender, and will not stay silent when liberty, freedom and fundamental human rights are being attacked. So we will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. And we've seen so many times in history how this story ends if it's not challenged, how appeasement, no matter how well intentioned, ultimately fails. And I have to say I endorse the ongoing cooperation between Europe and the United States to help defend our Ukrainian friends. In the last century, America led the free world in the fight against fascism and then communism. And in this century, America leads the free world once again, and we thank you for that. Mr. Speaker, symbols matter, and occasions like today matter as well, because they reinforce the invisible bonds that connect people of different political backgrounds together and join countries together. Our story is one of friendship and partnership, and above all, a belief in the possible, a belief in the promise of tomorrow. So thank you again, Mr. Speaker, and happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone.